Okay, next up in the system menu is the trim step. Now this is pretty straightforward. This is how many steps of trim per each push of a trim button. Okay, one push gives me 12 steps. Okay, I can change that and say, hey, I want I want the steps to be even finer. Let's say when you're out in the field and you give one step of trim, your helicopter, let's just say, is hovering fine, and one step of trim moves it too much and it's not fine enough. And again, depending on how low you can go on this trim step will depend on digital servos, their resolution, where your servo wheels are. I'm not going to get into that. But the idea being is, if you set too low and you hit the trim and you don't feel really anything happens, you might be set too low. All right, so by default, these are 12, but of course, I can change those, I can increase them, I can decrease them, and I can reset and bring them back. So these are all your trims, T1, T2, T3, T4, which are the four around your sticks, and then the ones at the top of the radio, which are LT, CT, and RT, can all be changed. The step, where one click gives how much movement. Okay, the higher the number, the more movement the trim, one hit of the trim gives. The lower the number, the smaller. Okay, so pretty straightforward there, and we'll continue on. Okay, next up in the system menu is the trainer menu, and you go in here, by default it is inactive. Alright, so let's activate it so we can see what it's all about. And then it comes up as off, mode all. We'll talk about all that in a minute, but nothing's going to happen until we set a switch and go from there. So even though we've activated, trainer mode is not really. So right now the switch is set to null, so we want to go in there and change the switch. Now, you usually want to pick a momentary switch to do this, and on this particular radio, this back switch here is the momentary, as you see. So this is, I can be in trainer mode here, and if the student loses it, I can quickly pull my finger off and it's out of trainer mode. So this is usually the trainer mode switch back here. Alright, so we want to set that. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick switch F or switch H, and we're going to go, okay, we picked it, we're going to come out. Now, once again, like all switches, once you select it, you got to decide whether it's on or off. And again, right now it says off, off, so throwing that switch, you can see it does not turn the trainer on. All right, so by default it's back. I want to make this the on position. Okay, so we hit on. Now watch when I toggle that switch I showed you. See, it goes off, on, off, on. All right, so then once we go back out of here, we're back to this, and we can see when I toggle the switch off, on, off, on. That's the default. But there's another thing you can change in the trainer menu. So mode is all. So what this is all about is, do I want, right now by default, when I give trainer switch, the student will have control over aileron, elevator, throttle, rudder. Okay? So that's what they will have. But let's say I'm training a guy and I'm going to handle the throttle and the rudder, so I don't want him to have, or her to have, access to them, only aileron and elevator. I can go in here to throttle and I can say inhibit. Oops, wait a minute. Did I just mess up? I did just mess up. Pardon me here. Activate that again. Hopefully my switch is still set. Yep. So what I want to do is I want to go into throttle, and I want to say normal is when I flip the switch, he's got control. If I come down here and turn off, when I flip the switch now, the student does not have control of throttle and rudder. I can also mix it. I can say, hey, I'll tell you what, I want input from both the student and me. This way, he can have control, and if he's not giving enough rudder in a turn, I can also give rudder and compensate and say, now see, you're not giving enough rudder, I'm giving rudder, and here's how the turn's supposed to look. So you can mix the two, so on and so forth. All right, so pretty straightforward there. That's what that's all about, and that is the trainer menu. All right, so with that, we'll continue on. Okay, next up is the sensor menu. Now, I have yet to get, the telemetry stuff. Hi-Tech says they'll send it to me, so I'll do a follow-on video on this with the sensor menu and all the things in this radio, but you need to have the sensors hooked up in order to get at that menu. So the next menu we'll talk about is the system menu. Okay, this is pretty straightforward. Realize, once again, there's one of two pages. So the first one is the backlight. Right now I've got it set off because while I'm shooting video, I don't want the backlight burning battery, and it looks better under the camera, my opinion. But anyway, you can go, alright, I want it on for, actually it looks better with it on, but I'm saving it for battery. So you can go 10 second, 20 second, 1 minute, 10 minute, 30 minute, 1 hour. And this is what this is this is the backlight timer. So, and always on and always off. So if I go to 10 second, what'll happen is right now, if I sit and wait 10 second, getting over a cold, so my cough will allow us to wait 10 second. Pardon me. You see the backlight went off. So this is how long before the backlight turns off, all right? So right now I'm going to go back to always off for the video. Touch lock is how long you want to lock the screen from a touch. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward, same kind of thing. Always off. By default, it was always off. All right, so I'd leave it like that. I like the way the touchscreen works with it in always off condition. Touch sound, you hear the beeping every time I touch the screen. I turn that off. Now you see there's no beep. All right, turn it back on, and you can turn it back on. All right, so then we want to go to I'll talk about screen calibrate in a minute. Then we want to go to page 2 and auto hibernation. Now this is if the radio's left on and there's no input, let the thing go into hibernation mode. Personally, I would recommend you don't turn it on. It's by default to never, but you can set how long a time that the transmitter's left on with no input before it goes into hibernate mode. Next one is warning at start up. What this means is, if you'll notice, right now I have throttle on and I have the condition switches on. So if I turn off the radio, all right, and I put the throttle stick up to half and I turn on, okay, what happens is, and I click transmit no, I think I have to, pardon me here, bear with, I'm going to pause the video, let me, I think I have to transmit. So this is interesting, and I hadn't noticed this before, but if I answer no to transmit, because you're not transmitting, the alarms do not go off. So talking about those alarms. If I hit transmit yes, and notice my throttle stick's at half, and I had that setting, I click yes, it tells me a warning. Hey, something's not right. Turn all switch conditions in the off position, and lower your throttle stick. When I lower my throttle stick, I go back to the screen, and I'm transmitting. All right, so I need to turn off again here. I'm going to go ahead and turn on so we can go through this. Okay, I'm going to hit transmit no. Notice no alarms, although if I had the stick up, it wouldn't have. So we're going to go back in the system menu, and we're going to go back into the system management, page 2, and throttle high. So if I don't want an alarm to go off when I transmit because my throttle's high, I can turn that off. If I also, let's say I like to power up my radio and hold for some reason, and I don't want the alarm and have to turn it off to continue, I can say no on the condition switches. This way now, I can go ahead and power up my radio and I won't get any of those alarms. All right, hope that makes sense. All right, so we click battery. And in here, battery type is what type of battery you want. Is it NiCad nickel metal, or do you want to change to a LiPo? I don't have a LiPo, so I'm not going to change. What this does when I change this is affects my alarm voltage settings and whatnot here at the main screen, okay? And when the alarm goes off and everything. So this will change what my voltage is displayed and when my alarm goes off, depending on whether I'm using NiCad or LiPo. Makes sense? So let's go back into that. All right, so that was battery again. If you want to use LiPo, make sure you set so. All right, so we'll go back to page 1. Screen calibration. This is in the new software. If you have the old software, you won't have this. But screen calibration allows you to calibrate your screen. So this is touch screen calibration. What this does is, let's say your finger where you push buttons and stuff doesn't seem to be lining up with the buttons. You may want to calibrate. All right, so let's go ahead and do it and see how easy it is. We're going to click yes. It's going to say press the screen on the mark. And by the way, you might want to use, if you got big fat fingers, you might want to go ahead and use a pencil eraser. It makes it a little more accurate. So we press the screen on the mark. Okay, then it's going to say press the screen on the mark here. Pardon me, it needs a good surface to do that. And you hold it down until it moves. Press the screen on the mark. Okay, press the screen on the mark. And press the screen on the mark. So basically the center and the 4 corners. All right, calibration is done. Do you want to keep this set up? If you click no, it'll go back to what it was. If you click yes, it will take the settings you just did. So again, if you were having a problem with touching the screen and things didn't really work right, weren't lining up, you might want to do screen calibration. That's what it's for. All right, so let me turn that off. Okay, so that's basically the system menu, and with that, we'll continue on. Okay, next up is the mode menu. Now, what this does is there are many modes out there available in the world, and mode means what controls what on the radio. In US, or the way I fly mode 2, which that means elevator, aileron, rudder, and throttle and pitch if you're a heli. All right, so that's mode 2. Mine's mode 2 by default because it's a US radio. But you can change that. And as you see, it shows elevator, aileron, rudder, and throttle. If I change to mode 1, now you can see it moves throttle over here on the right stick with aileron and elevator on the left stick with rudder. That's mode 1. Mode 3, different. Mode 4, different, etc., etc. All right, so that allows you to do this. Now, my earlier videos that talked about changing, when you change modes, all the stick adjustments on the back of the radio. If you change modes, you'll want to see that video to see how to set up the hardware of your sticks to match that mode. There's also 2 other ones, and this is manual, and this is where you can decide what you want. Let's say you're not mode 1, mode 2, mode 3, or whatever. You can actually go into manual 1, manual 2, and set up what you want for the stick positions, okay? So that's basically it. That's for changing modes. Again, US on mode 2, so pretty straightforward. Finally, I'm going to combine these two because that was pretty short, is the info menu. The info menu is just storing your own stuff and changing a couple settings. When I turn on my radio, it says Finless Bob when I first turn it on. That's your own name. You can change that. You can go in and rename and change that to whatever you want. Escape takes you out without changes. You can change your language. Where do you do that? Change language? Oh, I guess I can't change the language. And the software version. All right, so that's just information. And your product ID. And this is like my serial number of my radio. Interesting, you can't change language. Maybe I'm missing something. Probably in the diagnostic menu, which I'm not going to go into. Anyway, you can also set a password, and what that means is when you turn on your radio, in order to use this radio, you've got to enter a password. All right, so I'm just going to enter Bob for now. Let's make sure, let's make sure I enter that correctly, because if I forget my password, it won't be fun. But Bob. All right, so... And you notice it's asterixing out, and I hit enter. So I entered Bob. All right, and it's going to want you to confirm. All right, and I'm going to hit enter. And there we go. Password change is complete. Click OK. So now I have set a password. Watch what happens when I turn on my radio. Okay, turn it off for a minute. Turn it on. And it's going to say, hey, enter your password, Bob. Okay, and I'm going to hit enter. And it's going to let me in the radio. But you know what? I think passwords are a pain. But if you want to protect yourself from maybe someone steals your radio, they won't be able to reset it without setting into high tech or knowing some secrets. All right, so I'm going to go back to info, and I want to reset that password. Let's see. I haven't checked out how to do that, so let me just hit escape. Current password. Oh, it wants current password, so I'm going to enter Bob. Okay, because in order to change password, you have to know the password. I'm going to hit enter. And then I'm going to leave it blank, and I'm going to hit enter. All right, password lock function inhibited. I just removed my password. Done. Now if I turn my radio off and turn it back on, you will see I'm not asked for a password. All right, so pretty straightforward. That's the info menu. That's the mode menu, pretty straightforward. And that finishes the system menu things in here. We'll continue on with another series on the model menu.